Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talk It Up Tuesdays. So I'm excited to be here today with my colleague, Bakhtawar Yasir. And this month of May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So she's going to join us for a conversation about cultural identities and the way that that can strengthen resiliency. But before we get started, I am going to share a little bit about our organization. So we're here at the Turning Point. We serve survivors of sexual violence in the North Texas area. Our mission is to provide counseling, education, and advocacy for all those impacted by sexual violence. We have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week crisis hotline. That number is 1-800-886-7273. Well, welcome back, Taver.
Hello, thank you for having me here.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you because this is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And one unique thing I think about our community here in Collin County is actually the Asian American group itself is the largest minority population here in our area. So I think it's really relevant, and it's such a great benefit that we have you here to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Well, first, I guess I would ask, have you heard this concept of third culture kid or third culture individual?
Oh, yes, that's always been something that's always kind of like resonated with me. I never felt like I completely experienced what it means to be like completely American or completely Pakistani. So it feels like a title I kind of resonated with me, like both kind of coexisting at the same time.
Right. So that third country culture is just that experience you described, that being born from parents of one culture, but being raised in another culture. So you kind of navigate both experiences and bring to it something completely new. So I wonder what sort of perspectives or strengths you see maybe being a third culture individual.
Yeah, well, just so kind of everyone knows, I am Pakistani American. I was born actually in Karachi, Pakistan, and my parents and I came here when I was about 3 years old. And I think the best perspective I have gained as being a first generation Pakistani American to immigrant parents is truly remembering like how big the world actually is. So all of my dad's side, there are in Pakistan, and then with my mom's side, she has siblings in the UK, in Canada, and in a different country. I'm sorry, a different city in Pakistan than I was born in. So naturally, to like visit extended family or cousins, I traveled, and it's always such an eye-opening experience. And just realizing that there's so many different like cultures and languages and countries, and I am so thankful to like be American and be here, especially because my parents risked everything. They gave up their whole lives when they were around my age, and they came here without completely knowing English. And even though I am very grateful, I think a lot of attention in the world naturally goes to the US, which is very understandable. But I think sometimes there is perspective loss of other countries, other cultures, or just in general, like how big the world truly is. So I think it's a huge privilege being able to naturally being born into a life where I get to travel and see the world and understand like what things look like.
Oh, that's great. I love that perspective. So one of the things that we know, we work in violence prevention. That's one of the missions here at the Turning Point is to prevent sexual violence, prevent violence in general. But one of the protective factors, and also you might say resilience factors that helps people when they've experienced something traumatic, helps them heal from it and grow stronger. One of those is actually cultural identity and then connection to a cultural community. So I'm curious, how do you sort of maintain your cultural identity, and how do you lean into that connection?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think in general sense, like making sure I stay in touch with my roots, whether that be through food, music, community. But regarding the connection to our work, whenever I go out, I am physically presenting South Asian. So people look at me, they can assume or have a guess as to what my cultural identity is. And then when I talk about what I do for work, it's always a conversation starter. And that's usually a catalyst into discussing what is sexual violence, what services we provide, and just any sort of knowledge regarding this realm. And honestly, before I even knew about the turning point, I didn't realize how many services and resources there are available. So even just starting that conversation is so helpful. And there are many times where I'm at appointments or I just meet someone and it just comes up in conversation. And usually the person I'm having this conversation with, they even disclose to me like, yes, I'm also a survivor, or I know someone close to me who is a survivor. So simply having that conversation, and typically, um, if someone is from the same culture identity as me, they do ask me regarding like, how is it like being someone who is South Asian working within this field? So just having a conversation and even seeing someone who looks like you is so important. Representation really does matter, because there are many, we never know if there is a survivor that we are speaking to, and this is their first time learning about services, or we're probably planting the scene in their head and letting them know about what's available. So yeah, I think that's it.
Oh, great. I think that's so important. So I guess that we all recognize Asian American Pacific Islander encompasses a multitude of countries, of cultures, of peoples throughout this. But for you specifically, since you kind of brought in that connection with survivors, what do you see as maybe the biggest challenges or risks related to sexual violence within the community? Like, do you notice anything specifically that maybe makes the topic more challenging to discuss or to approach? Kind of what's your perspective there within the community looking at that intersection?
Yeah, that is such a wonderful question to be brought up. I can, of course, kind of speak on my experience being South Asian, but with my friends who are a part of the AIPI community as well, they have kind of given me some similar experiences as well. But I would say the number one thing is like the lack of discussion of this topic in general. There's a lot of taboo topics that you shouldn't be talking about, and one of them is sex in general. And while sex and sexual violence are not the same thing, if there's not a foundation or any comfortability to even talk about sex or what consent looks like, especially growing up when you're in middle and high school, then there's more fear to talk about sexual violence within the community. And alongside that, there's also just other taboo topics such as mental health as well. So, with survivors and survivors of sexual violence, there is a connection between that and mental health. So if there is so many factors saying like, don't talk about this, or if you grow up in an environment where it's just not talked about, naturally those topics will get brushed under the rug. So that is a huge problem I do see. Another problem I do see is the idea of shame and what that looks like. And while shame is completely deep rooted into our culture and it is like a huge barrier with like talking about certain things. And while there is nothing shameful to be a survivor, because we do know it is never the survivor's fault, I think in general, there's always like a fear of how will people react? What will people say? What's going to happen next? And there's so much uncertainty. And these factors can prevent survivors from talking about it, coming forward, or even just realizing like what's happening. Because if you're living in a culture where it's not talked about at all, that becomes a norm. So sometimes we may not know what we do not know.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think just having you on our staff and being able to represent and begin to start these conversations is so impactful. So probably all cultures in some way carry to different levels, this idea of shame and stigma, maybe, of talking about these issues. But within each cultural community, I think there are definitely protective factors or strengths that each culture can bring to this topic. So I'm curious what sort of strengths within the culture that you see that provide hope and a way to kind of lean into.
Yeah, that's also such a wonderful question and great point. Like you said, each culture does have things they need to work on and things that make them great. And I would say a couple of those things for me is hardworking. I notice a lot of people in the AAPI are just naturally very hardworking. And growing up, that was very ingrained into me that if you want something, work really hard, do the best you can to achieve that. And also, another big factor is kind of how hospitable we can all be. When in Asian culture, if someone comes to your home, you treat them like kings and queens. You feed them with food until they have to like unbuckle their belt and just like take their little belly out. And that definitely influences just the way I navigate relationships, the way I treat people. And when people come into my own home, now that I'm an adult, I have my own place, I'm always cooking more food than needs to be done. And I think that's just a sign of just like care and love. And yeah, I use that's a big factor into who I am today. And that's because of my culture.
Oh, I love that. I love that because that sense of care, you can absolutely see it comes through in the work that you do here at the Turning Point as well. So it's special. So as we wrap up, I wonder if you have any suggestions for people from Asian American, Pacific Islander heritage culture, if they're seeking to raise awareness themselves about this issue of sexual violence, violence prevention, healthy relationships. Any suggestions they have for maybe beginning this conversation in their communities or in their families?
Yeah, I know personally for me, when I started getting into this field, I did have some hesitance. I was thinking like, oh my goodness, like I'm the first one to kind of talk about this stuff. So it is a very intimidating thing. But I suggest that any conversation is better than no conversation, even if it's the smallest one. And just beginning that first step can be very, very important. And kind of like I mentioned before, representation does matter, especially being in the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color community. When I navigate my everyday life and I see someone who looks like me doing something, I feel more empowered to do that as well because I see this person and I go, if they can do it, this maybe so can I. So I think even just any conversation, whether that be with parents, immediate family, friends, cousins, anyone, I suggest to get started and just know that someone around you is probably a survivor and they're listening to you and they're hearing you out. So you're probably helping more people than you realize. But I also suggest that if any feelings or traumas or anything is brought up in this conversation, please do your best to like take care of yourself. That balance of making sure you're advocating for others, but advocating yourself is so, so, so important. And we say this a lot, but you simply cannot pour from the empty cup. So taking baby steps is always a safe bet. You want to make sure you're okay while you're also making sure others are okay as well.
Hey, those are some really wise words. And I love that they apply to anyone in the Asian American Pacific Islander community, but also to all of us.
Mhm.
That initiative of just beginning conversations and changing the way that we as a people look at this issue, support others who have gone through as survivors. So I appreciate all your words and thank you so much for joining us on Talk It Up Tuesday. Do you have any final words to add?
I will just say anybody who is watching or anybody who does is a staff or volunteer for the Turning Point, we appreciate you so much and y'all are so valued or just anyone who is a part of the Asian American Pacific Islander community, just know that you are just as deserving of healing and starting this process as anybody else. I know it can be very scary, but I think it's so, so important to take care of ourselves and it's okay to fight these taboos or negative aspect of the community, but also at the same time have our strengths and also change the community for the better. Both can coexist at the same time. And yeah, and again, you're just worthy of healing, whatever form that may look like.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Bakhtawar.
Thank
Thanks everybody for
you.
listening. We'll be back here next Tuesday for Talk It Up Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.